Good morning, Kate.
Good morning, Sid. How are
Yeah,
you?
good, thank you. How has your week been?
It's been good. It's been busy, which is good. I run an organization that raises money to fund hospitals in about 32 countries. So if it's slow, that's bad. Busy's good.
Yeah, I kept thinking about something you said that healing one woman can rebuild a community, and that stuck with me.
It's true. Women are often the centers of family life, for instance. And this injury that we treat, a childbirth injury that disables women, a woman that's basically taken out of her role as mother and wife and often supporter of other people in a family or community, let alone a worker. The ripple effects of that are massive. Now, the positive is you treat a woman who's been, ostracized through a childbirth injury that leaves her incontinent, you give her back that continence, you give her back her life. You also, again, the ripple effects for her family and her community are massive.
Sounds fascinating. I can't wait to explore that. Let's dive in. The following is a conversation with Kate Grant, CEO of the Fistula Foundation, globally recognized nonprofit. She is also the author of No Woman Left Behind, a powerful memoir on purpose, justice, and a mission-driven leadership. This is PreZero Sports Talk podcast, and I'm your host, Sid Bansara. Today, we'll explore what it truly means to lead with empathy and strategy, and how smart compassion can drive systematic change. Kate, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Sid.
What brought you to that first hospital in Ethiopia, and how did it change your life, Kate?
Well, I was working on Capitol Hill, the congressional body in the U.S., and with oversight for foreign aid, and had never heard of the childbirth injury fistula. So I was the only woman on delegations. About 30 years ago, they said, you should go to visit this women's hospital. And Ethiopia had been occupied by the Italians at one point, and fistula sounded like almost like a proper Italian name, like maybe the hospital had been endowed for a rich, now long dead Italian, Mario Fistula or something like that. But in this hospital were bed after bed, like a big Florence Nightingale ward of women with this childbirth injury that left them incontinent and often ostracized. And my heart's never been the same since that visit. I looked at those women and thought that could have been me, except for I was a middle class when I was their age at 18, 20, or most of these women were. I certainly wasn't worried about being abandoned by a husband, having a hole in my vagina. Sorry for your listeners, but that's what produces the incontinence and bladder. That's bad news, right? But the good news is they were all in that hospital to be cured. So it was seeing maybe myself a little bit in them. I could have been me, except for that I was born in a rich country, and that would have never been me in a rich country. I would never have been suffered in labor for a week and delivered a stillborn child and ended up incontinent. That would never have been me, but only because of the luck of being born someplace where, I had access or would have access to emergency obstetric care.
Yeah, yeah. So, Kate, you came from a high pressure corporate world. What made you walk away?
Well, I spent when I got out of university, I went and worked in advertising. I didn't really know what I was doing. I wanted a life that looked like a television character. I was familiar with a woman named Mary Tyler Moore on the Mary Richards Show, and I wanted independence and money and those things that are now seem independence is good, but the money now seems like a very shallow sort of goal. But that was me in my 20s. I worked on Madison Avenue, ran an agency and moved to another bigger agency, and the change point for me was I took a trip around the world, took a leave of absence from work. I've been working pretty much, help put myself through school, and then decided I want to see the world. And cute girls just want to have fun. I wasn't out to save the world. I was out to have a good time and see Europe and see Asia. And literally we went around the world, started in the US and last stop Fiji. We went, that way, starting in, again, Europe and working our way around. And it was the poverty in Asia. This was over 30 years ago. And I mean, there's still parts of Asia that are very poor, but day in and day out, month in and month out, we were traveling on the cheap. So we weren't staying in posh hotels for foreigners. We were traveling with average people in Indonesia and India and what was then Burma is now Myanmar and Indonesia. And I couldn't make advertising make sense. I sort of never came all the way back from that trip. I mean, physically, I came back. I was living in California at the time, but psychologically, emotionally, my soul, some part of me was still in Asia. And so left that career behind. Actually went back to graduate school, kind of a planner. Felt like I needed a skill set that wasn't just how to sell things, and studied international development in graduate school. So there was a definite, I had my ladder, if you will, that, you use that metaphor of climbing a ladder, and I had climbed a ladder. Was probably the highest ranking woman at this agency at about, I was around 30, 31. But yeah, but by the time I got to the middle of that ladder, I wasn't at the top, by the way, but I realized I was on the wrong ladder. I needed to really just jump off and start again. And that was a big move at the time, but personally, again, a deep level about my life, I would say one of the best decisions other than maybe learning to read or something, which I didn't have a choice. I was taught to read at school, but in terms of my own agency, deciding to leave one thing behind that was ill-considered, and that was, a life in advertising, and then decide to do something else. And I wasn't sure when I left advertising what that would look like. I just was pretty sure that I didn't want to use whatever abilities I had to, in essence, create emotional ties to, Coke versus Pepsi or Burger King versus McDonald's. I mean, that's really the dark arts of advertising is let's get you to feel emotions about branded products. And when you really sort of just wrestle with that, that's what I'm going to do with my life. It doesn't, it rang hollow, but it obviously didn't ring hollow in my early 20s because I was all in.
Yeah, yeah. What skills or mindsets from advertising helped you lead a global nonprofit?
It's a great question because when I left it, as you may have gathered, to sort of leave something behind, you have to, at least in my case, you don't see the 100 shades of gray. You sort of paint it all black. This is bad. I'm not helping anybody. I'm, whatever. I need to make it all bad in order to move away from it, right? But with some perspective, I'd say I use the skills in that I developed in that 11 years in that sector all the time. I mean, one of the things about the nonprofit sector in the U.S. is it runs like it grows at a rate that's not much greater than inflation. In other words, it's kind of risk averse. It moves like, molasses in January, so slow, syrupy. Think about Sweden in January. I mean, just things moves very slowly. And advertising is an extremely competitive business. If you're not getting things done, if your clients' products aren't selling, there's a price to be paid. Sometimes it's you lose an account, you lose a client. I mean, it's extremely competitive. And the nonprofit sector isn't competitive, but I'd say I took those sort of, work fast, make some good decisions, take some risks. I mean, you got to be checking all the time. Are you making good decisions? Sometimes I've made mistakes, certainly, but it's the disposition of move fast, prove impact. And I'd say with the foundation, we focus on sort of one measurable outcome, which is the number of women we can help, and it drives everything we do. And that's in the private sector, you'd be focusing on how many, widgets are you selling or, Coke cans or whatever it is, and, measuring profit out of those sales. We look at it differently, which is how many high quality surgeries can we do? We keep our costs low because we can do more of them. I mean, it's almost a private sector sort of invisible hand that guides what we do. And I think too often nonprofits, there's so many problems out there. They can get sort of the fog of mission creep where you're like trying to help people and it gets kind of foggy because you're doing a little of this, a little of that. And we're not that way. We're very outcome driven.
So you left the advertising world. Any moments, Kate, where you questioned if you made the right leap?
Oh yeah. I mean, I write about this in the book No One Left Behind. I went to work in Africa, in Tanzania, with the U.S. aid mission in Dar es Salaam. And this was before there were antiretrovirals for HIV/AIDS. It really was a death sentence. And I was there to work on marketing condoms. And I was used to, again, an advertising environment where things move fast, you get things done, and it just didn't move like that. Everything moved so slowly. I couldn't get approval on something I wanted to do. And the mission, like it opened because it was Africa. It was, they started early, I shouldn't because it's Africa, but 7:30 was a sort of office open time in the morning. It closed at 4. I joke at 4 o'clock, you could at 4 or 5 rolled a bowling ball down the hall and you wouldn't hit somebody. And that's okay. They were nice people, but I would say sort of servants, not warriors. And I think I had this kind of romantic notion that I'd have the same sort of jump how high energy I'd seen in my private sector life applied to this deadly virus. And yet the cumbersome nature of a big bureaucracy didn't didn't encourage that swing for the fences, take some risks. And it's not about the people. There were some nice, good people there, but you had a bureaucracy that just didn't, I would say, didn't deliver for poor people the way it didn't deliver nothing, but it didn't deliver
Mm.
efficiently. And so I, went to Washington and again, somewhat naively, since I really had not worked in politics and left 3.5 years later, somewhat disheartened by all of it. Just a big bureaucracy, a lot of political infighting. Now, there's good things that come out of politics, clean water, and free education. I mean, there's things that come out of a political process. I'm not trying to demonize it, but for me, it was a bad fit. I need to see results, and that just felt like a system that wasn't producing a lot of results for the poorest of the
Yeah.
poor. That's a longer conversation, but I think the problem is if you've got the recipients of the of foreign aid, or a lot of the foreign aid, the development assistance budget anyway, should be the poorest of the poor. And those folks don't have political agency. So what ends up happening is, to a certain degree, the foreign aid establishment gets captured by the people working in it. I mean, captured from a political science standpoint, and takes care of
Yeah.
them rather than the poor, because the poor are not pounding on the doors of capital saying, you need to get more food aid out here or more condoms for it. It's not happening. And that just was not a good fit for me. So yeah, there were some definite moments when I was in Washington, like, did I make a mistake? This just doesn't feel right to me. But my last 20 years of the foundation, growing it from, we were supporting one hospital in Ethiopia, now we're the leader in it. That's been a very satisfying journey because we're doing 35 times as many surgeries this year as we did in year one. So to be able to keep building that and knowing that those surgeries, we talk about it being surgery, but it's women, that gives me great joy and a sense of, as we all like, professional satisfaction when you can see the impact of your work.
Mm.
Don't we all want that?
Yeah, yeah, amazing. You've mentioned, Kate, the term smart compassion. What does that mean to you?
Well, my bleeding heart doesn't help anybody. I
Mhm.
mean, I might see things on the news that trouble me deeply.
Mhm.
But me sitting here just feeling sad for somebody or bad for a situation doesn't help the people that are suffering. The smart compassion part is, how do you sort of channel your energies into making a difference that helps those people that are moving your heart?
Yeah.
If not, in some ways, the compassion is somewhat self-interested. I feel bad. Okay, now what are you going to do about it? And there's a term also you may have heard of, effective altruism. And
Yeah.
there's one of my very favorite people on the planet. In fact, I talked to him earlier this week. Peter Singer wrote a book called "The Life You Can Save." He's an Australian ethicist and just retired a year ago from Princeton, where he's an ethics professor, a philosophy professor. In essence, his argument is, if you're somebody that's well off, you have a moral responsibility to help people, even though they're an ocean away. It doesn't remove you just because you don't see those people every day. If you have more resources than you really need to lead a decent life, and you're just sort of hoarding them, that's an immoral decision. I don't know if he'd label it immoral exactly, but ethically problematic. I don't know. I would say it as a philosopher would say it, but and I would say what we do is sort of an extension of that, which is, if I'm a well-educated person and have decent, I mean, this experience we talked about earlier, I have a skill set. I should be deploying that to help people, to take the empathy I feel or the
Mhm.
compassion I feel for somebody, and then use this brain I've got, along with some other people with their own brains, to figure out, how do we actually help them at scale? Because too often I get frustrated, honestly, Sid. Too often I think what happens is, with nonprofits, is they stay small. They feel good about some small impact.
Mhm.
And like, "Oh, this feels good. We're helping these people." Okay, that's great. Think harder. How do you help more people? How do you get creative to figure out how do you do more,
Yeah.
rather than just feel good about this modest
Yeah.
impact? Somebody that I actually quite respect, about a decade ago, said, "Well, aren't you done, Kate? You're already done this." And I'm like, we're just getting started. I mean, and again, we've grown dramatically in the last decade. Yes, we've grown a lot in those first 10 years, but there was so much more need. I mean, we're so far from done. It's the opposite of
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. And Kate, how do you lead with the heart? And I hear you, in systems that often lack it.
Well, I would say, our system, I have the organization is smaller, obviously, than the US government. A job that I wouldn't want, for instance, would be like the head of USAID.
Hmm.
I mean, now it's been imploded, so it doesn't exist anymore. But, and I don't, it's not to disparage the US government or anything like that. It's just that you've got a big bureaucracy that's the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, not to get too much into the weeds, but what undergirds US foreign policy on foreign aid is like 1,000 pages long. So you're so hampered in what you can do. With our organization, I mean, we don't take government money, and that doesn't mean I'm against government.
Hmm.
But their contracting process were so onerous, we've never taken a penny from the U.S. government. So the good news is with USAID sort of imploding, which is so problematic about how they did it, so tragic and
Yeah.
stupid. But we haven't been affected by that at all. So I don't know. I guess in terms of empathy for my own team, I mean, I try to be a good listener. Sometimes, honestly, I'm driven, and so I mean, I listen for good ideas. I scrounge for good ideas all over the place, and I try to certainly listen to all ideas, and then let's figure out where we're
Yeah.
going. I don't always get that right. I mean, and one of the things that's actually sometimes hard with nonprofits is people are sort of driven by the mission. Our team's mostly women, and I do want to be sensitive to people's feelings, but the trick is, and this is part I sometimes don't get right, is we need to be focused on the end recipients, not on ourselves. This organization was not set up to give us all personal satisfaction with our work every day. What I try to instill, and again, I'm not sure I'm always successful, but is the satisfaction should come from the work we're doing together to get these women treated. It should be externally focused on what we're able to accomplish, not did I feel good about what I was doing singularly. I mean, yes, I want to feel good about my contribution to the team, but it's focused outwardly. We had this wonderful consultant that worked with the board, this is about 10 years ago, that had this metaphor said that stayed with me about it's probably true with anything, but mostly true with nonprofits, is the organization starts out and the metaphor is a window. And you're looking out a window at the world you want to fix. You want to save whales or treat women with childbirth injuries or feed the hungry or, educate the illiterate or whatever it is, some problem you see and you want to affect change. But she said, but too often as the organization grows, that window becomes a mirror and the organization starts taking care of itself and
Hmm.
its own. It becomes a priority of whose title and conferences you're going to and, stuff you're doing that is basically, is somewhat self-interested. And the challenge as a leader, one of the dynamics is to constantly keep the focus on out the window. We're in business because of these women. They're the one that need our help. And if there's talent in this, the talent are the surgeons, they're not us. Like if we start thinking like we're the special ones because we raise the money, we get it out places, we've lost the plot.
Yeah.
The plot is there's amazingly kind people that give us money, and that the recipients or the end recipients are obviously women get the surgery, and the intermediate sort of hero, if you will, are these doctors that step in that could be making a lot of money in a capital city working with rich ladies. Instead, they're in distant provinces and resource constrained, poorest of the poor countries, helping often demonized incontinent women. Those are the heroes. And if we start thinking we're the heroes, uh-uh.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Fistula Foundation has grown dramatically. How do you stay true to your mission, Kate, while scaling?
Well, I'll tell you what, we've got, again, back to that thing that we're focused on, like we're focused on nothing else, is driving this surgery, number higher. So you'll see like in our newsletters or the wall in our
Hmm.
office, we've got, sort of a tracker. Of it's not a day-to-day tracker, but it's if you can read a bar graph, I joke, if you can read a bar graph, you can see our efficiency because the slope on the surgery line is greater than the slope on the revenue line. In other words, we're doing more. We're consistently raising more money, but if I said we're raising about 10 times as much money as we were at the beginning, and we're doing 40 times 35 times as many surgeries. So that's what drives us. And I said earlier, it's a great tool. If I were going to say to a nonprofit leader, try to find something like that because it also there's a lot of needs. For instance, most of 90% of our money is programmed into Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. There are a number of problems there, as anybody, reads it all would know. I mean, so and fistula is just one of them. It's easy to sort of say, but there's this other problem that's adjacent. What if we did midwifery training?
Hmm.
What if we provided contraception? What if we? we pretty much just say, you know what, those are valuable things to do, but those are somebody else's job. We're going to get very good at doing this thing, and we're going to be the best in the world at it, and we're going to just get good at that, and we're going to keep getting good at that. We're not going to back to the in the mirror thing. Yeah, it might be fun to go like, oh, let's learn about midwifery. That'd be nice. Maybe we can fund some midwifery programs. Let's do some, some contraception, distribution. I'm not against them. Would be for either one of those things, but that takes us off mission.
Mm,
And it makes it also harder to demonstrate impact. You're doing a little of this, a little of
yeah,
that, and all of a sudden you're stalled.
yeah. Any tough calls you had to make, Kate, along the way?
Well, I would say at the very beginning, one of the things when we sort of went global, we had been supporting one hospital, but we've been providing like support for almost anything they
Mm,
needed. And we needed to decide what's our strategy. Like, are we going to work on prevention? Because it's a big problem with women having children without access to emergency medical care. Again, are we going to do midwifery training? Should we do surgeon training? What should we do? And so I would say one of the calls I feel good about, and this is where my advertising background came in. Honestly, this sounds cold, but I started thinking about it through the lens of what's our product and how are we going to sell it. That sounds harsh because we're a nonprofit, like women are not a product. But it helped me sort of clear away this kind of fog of like a lot of good things we could do. And I thought, where is there a need? There was a need for treatment. And what do I think people would pay us to do at some kind of scale? And if we can demonstrate that we can convert money into surgeries for women and that those are truly life transforming, I think that's a very compelling value proposition, if you
yeah.
will. That's my advertising speak. But somehow that advertising background helped me see something that I'm not sure if I'd only gone where I went to, Princeton, studied international development. If I'd only studied that, like mostly government delivery, I'm not sure I would have seen it. I think I would have maybe seen, oh, we can do a little of this, a little of that. Wouldn't that be great? And it's not great if you can't get people to give you money to do it
Mhm.
at some kind of scale, because then you're just waddling along doing a little of feel good work, but you're not helping women at a scale that's going to, move the needle for a lot of women.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about the global partnerships. How do you identify and nurture the right partnerships across cultures and continents?
Well, like everything else we've learned in that process, I'm not African. I mean, so I was born, in California
Mhm.
and raised and educated here. As we talked about earlier, I've done a lot of travel, but that makes me culturally, I would say, aware or sensitive. That doesn't make me culturally knowledgeable. Africa's an extremely complicated place
It
with a
is.
lot of different,
Yeah.
ethnic traditions. And I mean, it's, overrun by colonialism. I mean, it is a complicated place. I'm mostly humbled to the
Yeah.
complexity. For instance, I would say where we can, we've hired people that are close to the ground living in Africa. So right now, like our chief program officer, who basically directs, I mean, with board support and approval of me or other senior staff, but directs the money we spend in Africa, is an African surgeon. I mean, surgeon is not a surgeon, but she's an African
Mm.
doctor, and she worked with Smile Train before us, the people that do cleft palates, and everybody that reports to her is African. So one way to make sure that our program in Africa is culturally sound and relevant is to hire people that are African, and that's what we've done. So that's one way around it, I
Mm.
would say.
Mm.
In terms of partnerships, that really varies depending on what we're trying to get done. I mean, we have a long-term partnership with FIGA, which is a French acronym for the International Federation of Gynecology Obstetrics. It'd be the F. The reason it's French is it'd be
Mhm.
Federation International, et cetera. But the largest organization for obstetricians and gynecologists, they have a training program they developed for fistula surgeons. So we were the primary funder of that in its inaugural years, is about a decade ago. They ended up getting external funding. We still partner with them on training surgeons. We don't fund it. Thank goodness we can then put our money solely into the surgeries themselves. But that was an obvious partner based on really strategic interest, which is if you want to increase the number of surgeries, you need surgeons that are trained in this kind of surgery. And it's not something you learn over a weekend. It's somewhat intricate surgery, and you really need somebody that's capable. And
Mm.
so they had taken that on. It was an easy yes for us to fund that initially. because, yeah, we need more surgeons. So
Yeah.
that's an example of the kind of partnership we
Yeah.
value.
And Kate, when you are in a complicated system like Africa, like you mentioned earlier, what's the key to building trust with the local partners?
Having trust.
Hmm.
I'd say that's it. I mean, it's interesting you asked that because I maybe you can get I'm not I mean, I've been around a few blocks. I guess Madison Avenue is a pretty, in some ways cynical place, but it teaches you something in the US
It's
refer to as
hectic.
street smart. It's
Yeah.
hectic. It's sort of dog eat
Yeah.
dog. It teaches you street
It
smarts because
does.
people are not in that to save the world, and it does gives you a perspective on people and their
Hmm.
motivations. And I would trust is what we do, and this is the way we've approached this from the beginning. Is we don't have an open grant process. In other words, you can't go to our website and tell us all about you and your organization, and we fund you. We've worked on basically a referral basis from the beginning. You asked a while ago, one of the decisions a pivot point
Hmm.
that was important. And that was a very important pivot point. It gets to right exactly that trust. In the very beginning, there was discussion amongst me and the board of whether we should have this open process. Like the US government has like a request for proposals, RFPs, and you just get a bunch of proposals and then you decide which ones you're going to fund. And there were people that thought that's the way we should go. I said, I don't want to do that. We're just starting. We're trying to learn. I think we want to make sure-footed steps. Like, let's do our homework and find out who's really doing the good work, who has the great reputations. We were really small at that point, so we're not going to be able to fund very much anyway. And then work on the basis of trust. So our first partner was when we went global was Dr. Denny Mukwege, who's went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in Congo.
Wow.
And so we funded him, I mean, with a $50,000, a first, I mean, I think since spent $3+ million, I mean, supporting his work, but the first grant was
Hmm.
$50,000. And it was, you tell us what you need and we're going to listen. And we'd done the reference checking. So the person, this is long before he won the Nobel Prize, had a really strong reputation. So you tell us what you need. We're going to ask a lot of questions so we understand, but we're going to start from the standpoint of you know more about what you need than we do, that you're an honest person that's not going to rip us off. And I say that saying I'm not just, I think only children trust blindly. I don't blindly trust people.
Hmm.
We do the homework before we start the conversation. So we start from the basis of you have a great reputation, and I want to hear what you need and how we can help you. And then it's in our interest and yours for you to sort of grow your operation there because we have ambition to grow and help more women. That's your ambition too. So how do we meet together? But most of that is based on trust. And again, I say that repeating, I'm not just like some everybody's good and we just trust everybody like I'm a 4-year-old. I mean, it's not that. It's the knowledge that they know more than we do. And we also want to create an environment, Sid, where if there's some tough thing that happens, like there's a death of a patient for some reason, or there's they've had to stop some kind of a work because of, I don't know, violence, or they lost a key surgeon, whatever it is, I want them to be able to share that with us, not feel like they have to hold hard truths because it might influence their funding.
Yeah.
So from the very beginning, we tried to create trust by assuming that the person that we're partnering with deserves it. And then we went out from there. Basically, the first year we had only 4 partners, but each of those 4 we found through doing some homework about people with good reputations, and we've expanded since then. So trust is at the core of what we do. Yes, we have grant reporting. If somebody has a yearly grant, they get it. They get 4 tranches of money, so they only get it quarterly. So we're not,
Hmm.
and there's reporting in between. So it's not that we just throw money at people and say, "Let us know how it goes." It isn't quite that. We do, like I said,
Yeah. Yeah.
pace it out, and we ask for results, and we track those, and we have site visits, monitoring, evaluation, make sure we're not being ripped off. But I'll tell you what, I mean, in hundreds and hundreds of thousands, I don't know how many grants we've got. I mean, I should know exactly, but I don't. There have only been a couple where someone was lying to us about basically padding surgery numbers to get more money. It just doesn't generally
Yeah.
happen. And back to USAID, I joke about USAID when I was there, they spent $8 to make sure 2 wasn't wasted. I mean, sort of. And it's not the fault of the
No,
people. It's a
no.
system that was put into place,
Yeah,
larded with 65 years of red tape trying to
yeah,
protect resources, and it ends up being just stuck.
yeah.
But I would say maybe that I'm not naive. I mean, that there are probably some places where in ways we don't know, someone's lying to us and, taking more than they deserve. I'm sure there's some of that in there. If I knew where it was, we'd fix it tomorrow
Yeah.
or today,
It's
but it maybe is, but that's not what we maximize around. We maximize around you're living there, you're committed to your brother and your
mhm,
sisters to get them treated. How can we help you? Help us understand.
mhm. And before starting your operation, let's say in a location, city, country, do you need prior permits and authorization from a local health organizations or?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, most of the time, I mean, a majority of the funds we raise go to individual hospitals. Sorry
It's
about
okay.
that. We do have offices in 4 countries. So in those cases, we've needed to get, it varies by country, but some government permitting. But most of the work we do, Sid, is with individual hospitals. So we haven't had to get, the hospitals probably have government approval, but us funding them
So directly to
hasn't
the,
been
yeah,
layered with working.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's not, again, we're not against
Mm,
governments. I mean, if a government can help us treat more women, that's great. But we've found that sometimes working, it's not, I would say around governments, we're in parallel. For
mm,
instance, Kenya is where we have our biggest program, and certainly, our program, as I said, our chief program officer is Kenyan. We certainly cooperated with the
mhm,
government where
mhm,
possible to advance the same goal. But governments, by definition, almost have a number of constituencies and tend to move more slowly and
mm, mm.
bureaucratically and inefficiently, whether you're in Nairobi or New York, they just do.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
No, it's quite efficient. I mean, just for the listeners to simplify what you said, you work directly with affiliated or the local hospitals, and you don't deal directly with the government for the sake to avoid bureaucracy and slowing down, basically.
yeah, well, when invited, like in Kenya, we'll work in concert with the
Mm,
government. We're not, we're sort of not at odds with them.
yeah,
And in these 4 countries where we have offices, we certainly have coordinated with
yeah,
governments there to make sure
yeah.
we're, meeting
Mm,
local
mm. We do.
policies.
Yeah, I.
That said, those are all run by, you know, Africans, as I
Mm,
mentioned earlier.
mm. Well, while I was hosting major events, some of the events are in different countries, and we bring our CMO, which is the Chief Medical Officer, which he or she doesn't have the permit or the license to do their job, basically, based on our events in a particular jurisdiction. So for that reason, we appoint another local medical authorized person to liaise with ours. So yeah, and for the sake to avoid the bureaucracy and slowing down the operations. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
yeah, yeah. How do you maintain independence while scaling internationally? Because you mentioned that you don't receive any government funding or support, and you try to stay away from complicated systems and stuff like that. But how do you maintain that independence?
Raising the money. I mean, it's being able to attract, private resources so that we can kind of do what we wanna do, which doesn't mean we're, like, rogue, it just means we're extremely, efficient. I think, as I said earlier, I mean, there are a number of organizations in the US, I mean, because of this, closure of USAID that are, I think,
Mm,
gonna go out of business because, it's not that there's organizations that take very little or no money from government, and then there's organizations that get a lot of money from the US government, and there's not many that are in between with sort of a mixed revenue model. It's almost one or the other
mm,
because the contracting regulations are so kind of onerous. So we're not hurt by that at all. I mean, I think a lot of the cuts have been reckless and unconscionable, but I didn't have obviously any control over that, but it hasn't impacted us.
mm,
And we haven't had, I mean, the only constraint we've had to growth really that's significant to date is money. And again, we're raising 10 times as much of it. So it's not that we haven't grown, but we could do even more. I mean, we did get a little over 2 years ago $15 million from Mackenzie Scott, the
nice.
billionaire philanthropist, and that money's gone as of January. We spent it. I mean, and we didn't spend it on ourselves. I mean, like our internal operation, it went all into our program budget, meaning it was converted into surgery. So we 40% uptick in our surgeries. with her resources. And the great thing about that is, I mean, when we first got it, I thought it would take us probably the better part of 3 years to spend it down just based on prior sort of growth. And, I said challenge the team, said, "Let's keep the cost low, quality high always, but let's see what we can do." And pedal to the metal, as I say, in other words, put the gas down and let's go. Um, I'm delighted. It shows a lot, I think, about the dedication of the doctors, the ones that we trust that live, once the African doctors in hospitals and our own team to be able to program that money quickly. It's also been a very powerful proof point. We've been able to attract a couple of other significant donors recently who I think previously would have been like, well, what are you going to do with $1 million? How could you spend that fast? Why should I give it to you? Oh, well, here's what we did with 15 million. My hope is that we can attract we have already attracted a couple. We're working on it to get even,
And
these larger
yeah.
donors
And for our
engaged.
listeners, Kate, now the funding, it's so you provide the doctor, the local doctor, any equipment, any meds, any other stuff?
Well, we do on occasion. I mean, it depends on, again, based on listening to what it is they
Hmm.
need. If they need money for sutures, et cetera. I mean, the thing with fistula surgery, and just to kind of the quick 101, is you're going and it's showing up holes. That's what creates incontinence, holes in bladder, holes in vagina, sometimes rectum. So it's not a very resource intensive
Okay.
surgery. Usually a woman's given an epidural, which is the spinal. So
Mhm.
she's not even given, full because she doesn't need
Yeah.
it. It's sort of like with childbirth. It's only from leads of the waist down to spinal anesthesia. And then, you basically need sutures. Now, yes, you need, I mean, ideally, I mean, surgeon has a good light because you're
Mhm.
operating in it
Yeah,
as
yeah.
a dark hole. Ideally, you'll have a table, like an operating table that can tilt so that there's just easier for the surgeon. So there's things, and there's obviously instruments you need, scalpel, speculums, etc. So it's not that there are no materials, but those are really pretty modest. I mean, what the woman does need is usually 2 weeks, catheterized after the operation for the injury to heal. So, we pay for that. So the surgery cost, which is $633, that's a weighted average across our, partners in 32 whatever when I say whatever,
Yeah.
32 countries, there's times where a program might close down, but over 30 countries. Um, that's a real number, and that is the cost sort of, for the care in the hospital, for the meals the woman's getting, the nursing care, the OR time. And I don't know about Sweden, but you don't get much of anything for, I mean, you have a different healthcare system.
Yes.
We have
We're
co-pays
lucky.
sometimes. You're lucky. Yeah, we have a healthcare
Yeah.
industry which maximizes around profits, unfortunately,
Yeah.
as opposed to human health, and we've got the data to show that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but so we don't run into problems there, I guess, if that's it. We haven't run into
Mm.
any significant problems.
And talking about your donors, any advice, Kate, for navigating donor expectations without losing your voice?
Well, we try to be, I would say we lead with the heart.
Hmm.
I do think that, that we are feeling creatures that think, and that what drives people to wanna help the women we serve is their heart is
Hmm.
telling them, "Oh my gosh, the young woman, and she's, suffered this horrible delivery, or baby's 90% of the time stillborn. She's left with this injury. She's gonna live a life of misery on her own because she doesn't have depend pads, the sanitary pads. She doesn't have hot and running cold water to help bathe herself when she's soiled. She doesn't have whole closets full of clothes she doesn't wear like a lot of us do. Um, so it's a very bad, disabling, life-destroying injury, and for $633, I can fix that for her.
Yeah.
So we focus more on the heart because I think that's what motivates people. That said, as we say in the US, we've got the receipts. So somebody more sophisticated donors, they can sit down. We've got a very powerful Salesforce customized database. We can take them through the paces. In fact, Mackenzie Scott's advisors, she didn't just for what it's worth. She isn't just like her people don't just like, call you and tell you you're giving you money. We went through a very rigorous process
Process.
with
Yeah.
her advisors
Yeah.
4 months ahead, and it wasn't just she, liked what we did and she threw money at us. We had a strategic plan. We took them through all of our
Hmm.
data. So people that want the head, part of it is would just tell my mind that my money's going for. We've also got that, but that's not what we lead with. I think a combination of both can be really powerful, back to that single metric that we drive, which is surgery. So, as I said earlier, a reasonably smart fourth grader can see what we do. And I think sometimes it's the combination of those things. I'm putting my advertising hat back on. That's very powerful. The heart attracts somebody. Oh my gosh, this young woman's suffering, no fault of her own, life of misery, and I can help. And then, but how do I know my money's going to be used? How do I know it's not going to go to, business class flights and five-star hotels in
Yeah.
Nairobi? Well, here we
Right.
go. So twice a year, I send out something called my investor letter, which sounds funny or silly, but one of our generous donors, I won't say their names, but Lars and Veronica, the first names, anyway, paid for me to do this program at the Harvard Business School in summer, strategic perspectives in nonprofit management, and I did it. And it wasn't. I was a little intimidated. It's Harvard and all of that, and yet I came back. Risk of sounding cocky, like, no, I think we're really on the right path here. It wasn't like I took away lessons, but what I took away was I should be doing a better job communicating to
Mhm.
our donors, at least the bigger ones, that this isn't just nice people doing nice work. Yes, it is. We're nice people. We do good work, but there's a strategy behind this and there's results. We've got the numbers. And so I do these letters and there's no patient pictures. They're 4 or 5 pages, single space, probably a lot. Some people throw them away because you got to actually read them.
Mhm.
But they're more like I would say like an investor update, like you'd see on an earnings call on Wall Street. It's a dive into our numbers and what our strategy is producing. And I think sometimes a combination, as I said a second ago, the combination of heart and head, if you can get that right, mostly heart, but enough head so that people feel confident, particularly major donors, that we're using their money effectively to deliver results. That's been a powerful combination for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. For someone listening, Kate, what's unique about empowering women health, true health, compared to other sectors?
Well, here's the thing about, and listeners may know this, they may not. The biggest difference between rich and poor in this world in terms of health outcomes is the odds of dying in labor and childbirth, pregnancy and childbirth. So if you're a woman in Africa, that can be, a lifetime risk of like 1 in 20. I have to look at the data, but it depends on the country, but it can be quite large, the odds of dying, depending on where you're giving birth. The odds in the EU, last time I checked, were like 1 in 11,000. Think about that. It's a
Mhm.
huge
It
difference.
is.
The US, unfortunately, because of our healthcare industry and racism, honestly, I think unacknowledged racism, the maternal mortality rate for women of color here is shocking. It's like middle income developing countries, not richest country in the world. But so we'd lower the average if you add us into it. But if you look at the EU versus poor countries, it's astounding. If you put the EU and the US together, it's still 100. We looked at this for a call I did with Peter Singer, 120 times greater the odds dying if you're in sub-Saharan Africa, lifetime risk, not individual delivery, by the way, this is lifetime risk. So that's quite shocking. And often, when the family size there is larger. So a woman who's disabled because of fistula or dies, if she has other children, the odds of those children surviving also drops. I mean, the family size in Africa is still larger, fertility rates 4 or 5, children per woman. So it can decimate a family and have obviously ripple effects we talked about at the beginning immediately to other children if she has them. It's shocking. Here's another thing just to put in perspective, and this is true globally. You want to predict the day in a woman's life she's most likely to die or be seriously injured, it's the day she gives birth.
Mhm.
And if you step back and put a gender lens on it, as Denny Mukwege, my friend who's won the Nobel Prize, said, the poorer country, the less empowered women are. And that's that you can look at that in terms of political participation, schooling, etc. So I would argue that there's sort of I want to say sexism, patriarchy, something, so that women are not getting the resources they need when they're taking all the risks to bring all of us into the world. Why is it that those resources are not allocated? Well, it's not that men are bad. It's just that they're not seeing the need and they're not making sure that women have what they need. So, some ways, I mean, Fistula Foundation treats a symptom of a much bigger problem. So maybe you'd say, like, well, why are you treating the problem? Well, because it's just bigger than we were. I mean, we can make a difference in the lives of these women that's profound, and nobody else was doing that at scale. So that's what we're doing. But it's really the root of the problem is deeper. It's poverty and gender inequality.
Mhm.
That's what drives what,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
problem.
Let's talk about leadership, Kate. How do you define leadership?
Wow. I don't know if I have an exact definition for it. I think it's the willingness to sort of listen to opinions and then make a decision. I would say leadership is in some ways it's decisiveness. It's being able to chart a path forward. And when you're doing it well, having the humility to basically listen to a lot of opinions before you just plow forward. But at some point, I mean, often it's not. I mean, sometimes calls are easy, and that's easy. We're just doing this. It's easy. Everybody agrees. The tougher part is to listen to voices that aren't necessarily in concert, and then decide where you're going and get people to follow you. There's one of my favorite, I don't know who said it, but it's great. It's a, if you're a leader without followers, just a guy or gal out for a walk. I mean, so you have to get people behind you.
Yeah.
And the tough part sometimes is you don't necessarily have unanimity about what you're doing. So you have to encourage people to follow someone that maybe had a discordant, thought about where we should go. There's the challenge. I don't know if that's not a very concise answer to a good question, but
Yeah. Yeah. What leadership advice you wish you had 20 years ago?
what leadership advice? Well, I'll tell you what, and I wrote about this in the book, No One Left Behind, is I am pretty entrepreneurial. When we're smaller, I was, it was fun actually. I was doing a lot of things. I was joking. It's like running an airline where you're, flying the plane and, picking up the baggage after it lands and somebody else is handing out the peanuts and taking the tickets. And I mean, it's like you're doing a lot of things at the same time. I mean, you're doing board stuff, donor stuff. To save money, I was writing everything. I mean, maybe it was good warm up for the book, but I didn't hire a writer because I could save money. Anytime I could save money and we could put it into surgeries to prove what we were doing, then I would just do it myself. And that was fun, and it helped us scale. I mean, the only way you scale is being able to continue to invest in the business and not as much into your own staff as maybe you gathered before. I mean, nonprofits in the US, a big chunk of revenue often goes to paying the staff. And if you don't get beyond that, you're just gonna stall. You gotta be able to put it into proving that your mission is, you can accomplish your mission. So what does it have to do with leadership? Well, I would say one of the things that I go back is like, be more attentive to when your role changed, because as we got bigger, I was still sort of entrepreneurial and focused on growth, and I wasn't focused enough on the team. So back to that, you're just a person out for a walk. When you have a small team and you're implicitly the leader, you don't have to think about it too much. But as we got bigger, one of the curves I missed was my role had changed. I mean, not completely. I still needed to be entrepreneurial and think about ways to drive the organization forward. That part hasn't changed, but I needed to divert more of my energy to what is it that the team needed to succeed. So, what would be the message? Be attentive to your evolving role, because your role is going to change, or what the organization needs is going to change. And if you keep driving like it's year one when it's year 10, you're not going to be doing part of the job. I mean, it just and that would be one of the things I would say to a younger self.
Thanks for sharing that. What's next for Fistula Foundation for the next 10 years?
Well, like I said, our surgeries are up 40% in the last 2 years because of this infusion of funds. And I can't mention the donor, but we got another. It's not quite the size of Scott, but a couple of other big billionaire donors. Let's put it that way. And what I'm hoping is that those donors who are just in year one with us, we'll see what we produce, and that we'll be able to engage them with larger levels of support. Why do I mention that? Because again, no money, no mission, and that's too often nonprofits say, "Oh, we're doing this and that." That's nice, but how are you doing it at scale? That takes money. I mean, those doctors have to get paid. I mean, they have families to feed. I mean, the nurses that take care of these patients, they have to be paid, and the patients are usually indigent. So money is the delta, if you will. Money is the difference. So our ability to drive more revenue is critical. So my hope is over the next 10 years, you see this, if we've grown in terms of number of surgeries, well, in the last 15 years, we're up by, a factor of 35. I don't think we're going to grow by that in the out years, but let's say we double or triple the number of surgeries we're doing in the next 10 years because we're able to increase our revenue by that. That's my hope.
Yeah. Your donors, they're all from the US?
No, we have donors actually in, I think last time I checked, 72 countries. I mean, it varies
Wow.
according to, border or whatever, but the majority are in the
Hmm.
US. I mean, back to de Tocqueville, we've had there's a cultural sort of private giving here is a big deal. I mean, a big deal, private giving to charity. And that's partly because we have such a weak social safety net. We have a weak social safety net and we have stronger sort of individual giving
Hmm.
than a lot of other countries. And so, yeah.
What do you hope your memoir, No Woman Left Behind, inspires in readers?
Well, what I hope it does, a reason I wrote it mostly was to create awareness of fistula. That's why I'm so grateful for your time today, Sid. Is that one of the hardest things about this, and I say this 20 years
Yeah.
in, is getting people's attention. That's because it affects a population people don't generally see. I mean, generally people don't travel in the US to sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, there's some, go for safaris or whatever, but it's not something they literally see. The injury was largely eradicated in developed countries and like, in Europe or the US. In fact, in Manhattan, where there's the Waldorf Astoria Hotel for people that have been in
Hmm.
Manhattan, in New York, where that site is, in the 1890s, there was a fistula hospital that closed because it used to affect women here, but now it's largely been eradicated, so people don't have an awareness of it. And then I don't care whether you're in, Dubai or Dallas, nobody wants to talk about women with holes in their vaginas. I mean, it's not a cocktail party
Yeah.
conversation, it's a
Yeah,
hard
it is.
topic. So back to the book, my thought with the book is it opens up hearts, minds, I hope eventually wallets to this issue. I tried to write it. I started off honestly, I started writing my first sort of, just whatever, speculate. I was writing it more like a how-to book, sort of the kind of conversation we were having earlier about strategy.
Mhm.
And then thought, 1, I think that's gonna read like a Harvard case study, it's gonna be boring, nobody's gonna read it, and 2, I wasn't sure we have a singular experience that everything we'd done would necessarily apply someplace else, and so I think a memoir is a better way to do it, to make it a good read. I had a couple of I wrote it myself, I didn't have a ghostwriter, but I did hire 2 separate professional editors to go through it, and one of them in particular, after the end of it, I mean, it's 50 pages shorter once this person
And
had
on that,
suggested I didn't need. Yes.
Kate, the writing process, was it straightforward? Was it easy? Was it complicated? Do you have a favorite, I don't know, moment to write? Morning, evening?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I mean, it started off as this, like, how-to almost like a how-to and the lessons learned about strategy and growth and
Mhm.
blah, blah. Um, and then I would say probably I took me 3 years from the first draft to, like, the book shows up, advanced reader copy printed, yeah, so I guess back to it is figuring out that what I wanted to do, that was a little humbling, and then once I decided that memoir was the way to go, I would say the thing is it took me longer than I thought to do it. I
Mhm.
thought like, "Oh, I've written a lot," and then you realize this again, and you say like, "Duh." I'd written a lot of op-eds in my life, these 800 word, argument for this, that, or the other thing,
Mhm.
and a lot of newsletters. And I thought, well, this is just a big that. It's not. I mean, if you're going to make it read so that it doesn't read like a term paper that nobody wants to read, it was a lot more work to make it work. And in fact,
Mhm.
the editing was a whole year. I mean, a back and forth. And
Yeah.
I did take I took time off from work. I mean, not pay. I wasn't sure honestly if I had a book in me, so I didn't take work time to do it. I wrote it on vacations and weekends
Mhm.
because I don't want the foundation to be paying me if I end up with a nothing manuscript. What signal does that send to my team?
Mhm.
Um, and then the editing was really important. Getting a couple people that knew what they were doing who weren't my friends, or, family to look at it. And one of them I said, "Be ruthless. Tell me where it's for, family to look at it." And 50 pages came out, not all in one, just paragraph. So
Yeah.
that's where the fifth editing it word for word, just like, and then what is it? 100% of the profits, by the way, I wanna mention that, go to the foundation. So this is not a self deal on the
Great.
foundation
Yeah.
gets all the money. But my objective wasn't to raise money with the book. My objective was to raise awareness of what we do. The second part of it, and we talked about this at the very outset, Sid, was is that maybe some younger people, and this is true, probably not as true in Sweden, but it's definitely true in the US, where people that have gone to universities and the more elite it happens, and even more so, they get directed into Wall Street, Madison Avenue, consulting, whatever it is, some profit maximizing entity
Mhm.
without a lot of consideration about what it is you're doing and just one more brass ring to catch. And I thought maybe somebody who like I was started off kind of overachiever and has some dark nights in the soul where they're realizing like all I'm doing is maximizing profit at a law firm, at a consulting firm. This isn't what I want to do. They could see themselves in what I did a little bit, and that maybe gives them confidence to, step off the rat race. Is Lily Tomlin, the comedian in the US, said the problem with the rat race is even if you win, you're still a rat.
Love it. Yeah.
And great.
Yeah, it is. It is. Kate, if you could rally the world around straightforward action today, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, you mean like magical powers? I'm gonna sound like I don't know, something. The amount that the world spends on solving problems with weaponry
Mhm.
is insane to me when I step back and look at it at all. One of the biggest line items in the U.S. budget is we just tracked $1 trillion a year. We're 5% of the world's population. The US spends like, I don't know, you'd add up the next 5 countries and, in terms of our military budget. And maybe there's good reasons we have a lot to protect around the world. But when I look at Ukraine or Gaza or Congo or whatever, I mean, it just seems like we collectively have primitive ways of solving problems, and almost all wars end up being solved politically. And so I know that isn't about fistulas. But when I look at the world and an allocation of resources and misery, it just now I'm gonna sound like a feminist. I do think, and this won't happen in my life, it probably won't happen in the next 100 years, but if you did have women with really an equal seat at the table, not that women have to be leaders and act like men or otherwise their country's gonna get run over, so women leaders have to look like Margaret Thatcher. If you had really equality in decision making, I'd like to think we'd get to a place where we could solve more problems without brutal killing and waste of resources. I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but that's if you gave me one thing, that's that magical powers. That's what I'd wish for.
It's important. It's absolutely vital and important. Yeah.
Well, even countries in Africa, they spend a huge amount of money on like a Congo on weaponry. Like they
Mhm.
can't afford, a C-section for a woman in labor. There's not a doctor, but they can afford, RPGs, or whatever it is. And I just it and I know that maybe think they need that to defend them against Rwanda. I mean, but it does when you step back, just think about it. It just seems so
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah. Crazy. Crazy. Kate, now it's time for our lightning round.
Okay.
Ready for speedy Q&A?
Yes.
Let's do this. Tea or coffee?
Oh, coffee.
Coffee. Favorite book you've read recently?
Moral Ambition.
Mhm.
I got it actually right here. I'll plug him.
By Rutger
Can you read
Bregman.
it?
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic.
It's the subtitle is "Stop Wasting Your Talent and Start Making a Difference." The quote from Trevor Noah on the cover: "A call to action for humanity."
Lovely.
It's basically back to those young people that are, using their talent for something that isn't maybe making the world a better place. So,
Nice. Nice. Ideal way to start your morning?
um, a, some yoga stretches,
Mhm.
a good strong cup of coffee, as you asked a second ago, and maybe a deep dive into the New York Times for like 20 minutes or half an hour to get my brain engaged.
If you have a chance to have a dinner with a historical figure, who will it be and why?
Nelson Mandela, I want to know how he emerged from Robben Island after people in prison. He left the place with such, I don't know, sort of peace in his heart. I'd like to know about that journey.
Mhm. One hobby that surprises people.
Um, gosh, that's a hard one. I guess, I mean, reading. I mean, I can see my thing at work. That sounds such a boring, like I read, but like at work, I'm pretty hyperactive. I mean, I move pretty quickly, I idle pretty fast. And yet when I'm not there, one of the great joys and it's as I get older, my son's grown up, I have more time for it, is reading. I know that sounds sort of pedantic, like I read like it's a hobby, but it really it is. So sorry, that's kind of a boring
No, it's
answer.
not. It's not. My next question is go to way to relax after a hard week or a hard day?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's a couple of good ways. I mean, a long brisk walk.
Hmm.
I love dogs. We're in our 3rd kind of rescue dog, and she loves exercise, and so that's a way to do it, you know? Dinner with a good wine with a friend. I mean, there's so many different ways to relax, right?
Yeah, yeah. What's the most inspiring place you've ever visited?
Oh, wow. It depends. I That's a hard one to sort of collapse. I can think about places with great natural beauty
Hmm.
that leave me with a sense of awe. Just Yosemite Park, for instance, it's about 4 hours from me. It comes almost out of nowhere, the valley of California, which is mostly agricultural, and then there's this amazing it's just, "Oh, cue the angels." It's incredible. Um, in terms of man-made structures, the first that like, this sounds weird, but the Taj Mahal,
Hmm.
when you think that that was built 400 years ago, and it's
It
beautiful, and
is.
it stood the test of time, and it's also a monument to a wife that died in childbirth, so there's a resonance with me about why that building was built, but you think about it, and it's gorgeous still. I mean, and sort of literally stood the test of centuries.
Hmm.
Um, and I think partly because, again, the built to a woman died in childbirth, very an issue that's very close to my heart. But I'm astounded when maybe you're the same way, when my mind isn't trying to solve work problems, it's not distracted. Places with natural beauty, I mean, even sometimes the coastline of California, I could just be hit with like, "Oh, I'm so lucky to be a human right now." Um,
Yeah,
that makes any
yeah.
sense.
No, no.
Sometimes in Washington, actually, Washington, DC, I mean, when I'm feeling patriotic, I'm not feeling patriotic right now with what's going on with I'm troubled, let's put it that way. But there's times there I could get almost weepy about it when I think like, they got some things wrong. Let's start with slavery, but we pushed back 250 years ago, the British, and created this system of government,
Hmm.
informed by the sages going all the way back to, Greek and Roman times, but these 3 equal branches of government. And when you're in Washington, you can see the White House, you can see the Supreme Court and the Congress, and there's something still just, profound about
Yeah.
that. I mean, again, we're going through a very tough time now, but that way back when somebody had the foresight to create this kind of out of nothing,
Hmm.
and then I got lucky enough to be born here. I mean, it is yeah, there's many things in my life I feel grateful for.
Yeah.
That's one of them.
Nice, nice. One daily habit that grounds you.
Oh, that's an easy one, meditation.
Hmm.
Meditation. I write about this in the book. I got really sick about 10 years ago. I picked up a virus in Chad, but the big thing was that I just was overriding my own like warning lights of you're burning out, you are exhausted, you are traveling too much. I ended up in a hospital in London in a cardiac ward,
Hmm.
and just because of heart irregularities, and it was my cardiologist back in the States. Basically, when I was like blood pressure medication, all this stuff, I didn't want to be on it. I exercise, and I'm not overweight, or there's, things that would, obvious lifestyle changes. And he said, how about, you tried meditation? I thought, yeah, it sounds a little woo woo to me. Plus, yeah, I didn't say that. I just said, like, who has time? And he said, well, I've been meditating twice a day since medical school. I'm looking at it. He's about my age. I thought, yeah, you probably have a wife to take care of your kids and everything, but irrelevant. And I thought, at that point, I was willing to try anything to just get off blood pressure medication. And anyway, it worked. My blood pressure came back down. That was 11 years ago, 12 years ago. And I do it now every morning. It's not magical. It doesn't happen overnight. Like I felt a sense of equanimity, but I now can't imagine not doing it.
And can you and
So
can you
yeah,
switch off completely or partially?
sometimes, if there's a lot going on, I try not to guide. I mean, there are people that approach it like, okay, I need to just focus on breathing, like
Hmm.
force out the ideas. I don't do it that way. I just am like, I'm trying to keep my mind as an open space, but when ideas come in, I let them have a power of their own. And sometimes I'll tell you with work stuff, there's sometimes I think of something, there's a dot, my mind connects in that space. It isn't desire is not like this is my problem solving time for work. It's not that. But I do notice sometimes I will think of something that I hadn't otherwise thought of, that relates to the foundation, growth, some kind of problem. But mostly it's just a time to be very standard on something that isn't problem solving, if
Hmm.
that makes any
Yeah, yeah,
sense.
yeah. What song always puts you in a good mood?
Oh. Well, there's one that's come up recently, it's not an old one, but "Happy" by Pharrell Williams. In fact, when we got the $15 million from Mackenzie Scott, it's this song I had on my phone that I blasted into the conference room. It's happy, with the walls without a roof, the
Yeah,
sense of
yeah,
it's one of the lyrics. It just makes me joyful when I listen to it.
nice. And lastly, a piece of advice or wisdom to our listeners on any topic.
Forgive yourself for your mistakes. Try to learn from them. That's probably the biggest thing I would say, at least for me, which is, it's a feature, not a bug. We're all imperfect, and the only way you learn. I try to say this to my son. In some ways, the only way you learn is making mistakes. And I try to say this to my team too. If you assume that you created the mistake, like assume 100% responsibility, you give yourself power to learn from it and grow. But of course, all of our natural instinct is it's not me, it's you. It's a bad situation, it's a bad person. It's not me being bad or me being insufficient or me being whatever. And if you can invert that and say, no, I have 100% agency for the problem, which is probably not accurate. There's probably some other person that's messed up too that created it. But you give yourself power. And if you look at it, the pain is a teacher. It's a hard thing because we all resist pain. But if I could tell my younger self that, that's what I'd say. Like in terms of building the foundation, that's been the whole thing, is having the willingness to fail, not big, but make a bunch of mistakes and learn and keep growing, as opposed to like, oh, I have to be perfect. There's nothing that'll stifle your growth, I think, faster than I have to be right at everything.
Yeah. Kate Grant, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it's been great, Sid. What a joy. What a joy it is. You have to come see us here in California.
I will. It's in my plan because I have some
Okay.
project there.
Oh, it sounds good.
Yeah. And to our listeners, I leave you with a few words from Mahatma Gandhi. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. That's exactly what Kate Grant has done, dedicating her life to restoring dignity, health, and hope to women across the globe. Her leadership reminds us that service isn't just a calling, it's a path to profound purpose. Thank you for tuning in to the Pre-Zero Sports Talk podcast. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to our show. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep making a difference. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.